Hello and welcome to another episode of For the Love of Sports. My name is Michael Rasile. This is a show where I get to talk about sports, I get to talk about business, and I get to talk about everything in between. Today, my guest, I have Matt Lombardi. He's the co-founder of Beam and a professional hockey player, formerly with the Devils and the Penguins. Matt, how you doing today, man?
I'm doing good, thanks. Thanks for having me on the show.
The pleasure's all mine. You got this sweet, serene background. I don't really know where we are. Are we in a warehouse? Are we in like a startup building? I don't know, but it looks great. Sun's coming through the windows for everybody out there just listening on the podcast. 5 stars if you haven't already. Really would appreciate that. But Matt, I'm very excited to talk about Beam, what you guys do in the CBD, the health and wellness space, because we all know that's extremely important for athletes. Obviously, you being an athlete, you know that very well. But the first question I have for everybody on the For the Love of Sports podcast is, why do you love sports so much?
It's a great question.
Thank you.
I grew up, I guess I was skating ever since I can remember. I think my parents told me I started skating when I was 2 years old. I guess I'd probably answer that question differently as I've gone through life. Like, I'll just jump in, answering that now versus maybe when I was in college or, in like the kind of the thick of my career. But I think now, I just think sports is the ultimate metaphor for life. I just think it teaches you about competing, teamwork, leadership, winning, losing, dealing with adversity. And being, founding Beam with my best friends, Kevin, who's also an athlete, played baseball at BC, played professionally as well, similar, stopped early because of injury. Um, it's just so ingrained in our team culture as we're building the team, evolving, growing a company. Like, so many lessons in our style and everything that we do is just rooted from, being athletes. So that's how I would answer that now. I think going back and answering that when I was in college, and I used to love watching NHL games because I'd be studying it, I'd be trying to learn just everything. It was eat, breathing, everything was hockey. That was just like pure passion. Just loved it. Loved everything about hockey and sports and learning about other athletes. And again, now just like a new chapter in my life, it's more just about like what that's taught me and how I use that, I guess, in a new phase.
Yeah, and I always love asking that question to open it up because I'm sure we're going to come back to a lot of that stuff throughout the
Hmm.
conversation, right? Like understanding you as a founder, leadership techniques and skills that you've learned, obviously teamwork. You're going to need to know a lot about that, especially if you're going to run a business or even just work in a business in any capacity. So it's always a really important question that I like to ask. And I think it's really important, again, from this perspective too, that you were an athlete and now you are, I guess we could say entrepreneur, right? You co-founded a business.
Hmm.
That's an entrepreneur, whatever. And really in a particular area that is, can we call like this the Wild West still? Is like, do you consider the CBD industry kind of still Wild Westy? I mean, it's a lot better. I've bought the stuff from the gas station. Don't think it
Hmm.
works that well. I've also used real stuff and it worked a lot better. Surprise, surprise, right? So I guess, I'm kind of curious before we kind of, it, let me take a second. Sorry. It's
Hmm.
live. It's fine. We'll do this. It's more fun this way, right? But I always
Yeah.
love to ask athletes, importantly, like whose idea was it for you to end your career, right? Because it's either injury's idea, it's either somebody says you can't play anymore, but you're still gunning for it. And very few athletes are letter C. That is, no, I was actually pretty content and I was ready to retire. Like that's very rarely the answer. And I know your story a little bit. So if you don't mind telling us about your hockey career and kind of what led you to the CBD space, because I think that's obviously the crux of this entire story, right?
Yeah. It's so funny you said this. I'm reading Michael Strahan has a book. I think it came out somewhat recently, and I was reading it. The chapter, a couple of chapters reading this morning. He was talking about that when he retired after they won the Super Bowl, and he went through that exact process and went through the same thing. Which just like he loved. I think he said his dad said to him, it was from the movie Babe with the pig, and he said, "That'll do, pig. That'll do." And he just kind of said, I think that like once my dad said that to me, like I just knew like I'm done. Like I don't want to get to the point where my body tells me I can't, when the coach tells me I can't, or like the fans or whatever. Like I'm telling myself like I can walk away from it. So I think, I'm sure as athletes, like that's the ultimate, is to leave on your own terms. But it was just funny to be reading that this morning. But for me, I unfortunately just had a really bad concussion my last year playing, and it just forced me to start thinking about life after hockey. And it was frustrating because I wanted to continue climbing and improving in hockey and hopefully make it to the NHL at some point. But having that timeline get cut short, or just being forced to reconsider a different journey. I remember those first few years after hockey in particular being really challenging, just wanting to go back and play. But then, gosh, every year a whole new, flock of players come in, younger, talented people. It just gets harder and harder. Um, and I think, then to, I guess, back into like my post hockey life, really what I learned from hockey, just as I was talking about earlier, is just I was so passionate, but I loved it. And it was just so invigorating, even when it wasn't easy, even during the hard times. Like, I still loved the process of it all. And
Mhm.
I started working at finance, a mutual fund company in Boston. I just found a lot of my friends that played hockey that, had stopped either after college or playing pro for a bit, just got into commercial real estate or finance. And I ended up in finance. I love learning about something new, love learning about the markets and things like that. I ultimately was just starting to realize, for me personally, like, that path wasn't something that I felt overly invigorated or passionate about, again, coming off, playing hockey. I was trying to look for something that just kind of lit me up the same way. And, my dad's an entrepreneur, and I think I have that in my DNA a little bit. And I guess and it's funny, we were just having a team call, and we often talk about, we have some younger employees on our team, whether they're right out of college or, a few years out, that's their second job. But man, if I could go back and know what I know now, I would have joined a startup and learned like this, like, all-encompassing experience, and learned about fundraising, team building, like get involved in something really early stage. It's just such an amazing learning experience. And looking back, that's probably what I would have done. But and I don't know that I always would have advised people, because it wasn't easy, but I've always just in my gut said, I'm just going to do what I think I'm passionate about. And I trust that it'll work out at some point, and I'll figure it out along the way. And so I left finance. I started coaching at a prep school in Boston and helping out with their varsity team. Had some great players. Ryan Donato was on the team. His dad's Teddy Donato, who's the coach at Harvard, and obviously, an NHL great. There's a handful of players that have played Division I, high draft picks. So that was really fun, just to work with, elite players, great coaches, a good school. And what was interesting was, when I was there, a lot of the players, who I was just fresh out of school, and I went to Boston College, and Boston College had just won the national championship again that year. And so that was, especially being in Boston, like, that was very cool. And I think ipso facto, they thought I was cool because I, wasn't too far away from being removed from playing there and then playing professionally. So anyways, they would ask me questions all the time, like, do drills them after practice, what do you eat before games. They started asking about, spring and summertime training to get ready for the next season. And long story short, it was Teddy's kids, Ryan and Jack. They were on the team. They just started popping down in my parents' basement after school. I had set up like the perfect hockey basement through my career, just an area to shoot pucks, an area to all the weights and training, everything. It was like everything you would need as a hockey player. It was awesome. And started training them, working them out in the spring, right when the season ended. And then it just seemed like a snap of a finger. And like, summer's come around, there's like 100 kids in this training program that I didn't even mean to really start. And I loved it more so. I didn't always envision myself wanting to be a strength coach. It was more just like, I love mentoring. I love trying to inspire these young athletes. And then I also love like trying to figure out, like, everybody's on their phone now. How can I like use their phones as like a coaching tool with them? And I think that was more my entrepreneurial brain that I didn't realize I had at the time, thinking like, how do I use technology to make this more efficient or like connect better with these kids? And then that somehow led into meeting a dad whose son had joined my program, who's a technology executive. And he said, hey, you need to meet my partner at this other company they're at. And he said he built this app to manage his tech team. You should meet with him, because I think his app he built would be like a great tool for you to use to like put all these kids workouts on and train them and coach them. And this then led me into my, I guess if you want to call that coaching program, sort of my first business. But my second business was, I actually ended up starting with those two guys I was just telling you about, these two tech executives. I was sort of like the guinea pig initially of just like using that to coach these kids. And then I was just thinking, when I was at Boston College, all of our communications, our itinerary, practice plans, data, everything was in 15 different places. And this was like 2014, 2015 too, just for some context of, timing, technology, and things like that. And so I'll try to give the cliff notes here. Long story short, we gave that to BC and gave it to Harvard, both hockey teams, and just said, use this as your main communication tool for a year and see if it helps. So that ended up being called Driven, which the three of us had started. And that was really fun. We started hiring, a bunch of ex or current athletes, whether it be Olympic rowers, professional hockey players, lacrosse. And essentially we were selling this into their verticals and their sports of elite Division I teams or professionals. So like the Bruins are using it, the Celtics used it. We had teams at Notre Dame, at Boston College, Harvard. And then about I think it was maybe like 3 or so years ago, I wasn't all that eye to eye and aligned anymore with my two partners I started that with, and ultimately decided it was maybe best for me to move on. And this is where my, it takes an interesting turn, probably more of a unique story too, as I ended up, launching Beam. Is I was engaged at the time, and my fiance was a former Olympic gymnast, and we were equally passionate about wanting to inspire young athletes. Obviously, me with hockey, her with young
Mm-hmm.
gymnasts. And what was fun from that was we, was kind of into apps and technology at the time, and we developed an app that was kind of what I was doing with the hockey players, which essentially was, inspiring them, mentoring them, coaching them, giving them access to stuff. But this was all digital, and so we launched this app, and we built a huge community of young gymnasts. And if you're a gymnast, you're getting access to Olympians. We did a documentary series of UCLA gymnastics. We had the best coaches, trainers, everybody in here. All the other young aspiring gymnasts could connect with each other, sort of like in a social media way, but it was fun because it was only gymnasts. Unfortunately, that business and relationship came to an end.
Oh no.
That
Yeah.
was about 3 years ago, which then kind of segued into Beam, which while that was sort of coming to an end, I had reconnected with Kevin. And pause me if my story is getting confusing or too long, but
Nope,
I
I
had
can follow.
reconnected with Kevin. Yeah, prior to that ending, Kevin and I had reconnected in Boston, became best buddies. We were obviously knew each other and friends from school, and he was really kind of similar story again. Just he played baseball, played professionally, was a high draft pick for the White Sox, had a bunch of surgeries, Tommy John, etc. Wound up out of sports, ended up working at VMware, which is a big tech company.
Mm-hmm.
Was doing really well, but I think was a story a lot of people can relate to too. Like, I'm doing well, but I'm not really passionate. I'm kind of just, on autopilot here and not really enjoying what I'm doing. I kind of want to change. He also had, his dad was an entrepreneur. He also had a little bit of entrepreneurism in his blood like me. And we started training for the Boston Marathon in 2018. And that's when we started reading about CBD. So at that time, CBD definitely wild, wild west of what the heck is going on. What is it? People are so uneducated about it. It's still a very high skepticism, low trust space today. 10 to 10x that, 20x that 3 years ago. And what was interesting is we started reading about it, but we didn't know what it was. Thought it would get you high. How does it work? It helps with all these different benefits. And ultimately, our curiosity won over, and we were pretty skeptical because we used to get drug tested all the time playing sports, and but ultimately we tried some products. I was realizing benefits from it and some pain points I had somewhere with Kevin, and we started talking about it a little bit more, looking at it. I would, you'd look at it in the retail stores I carried, or you'd see it at a gas station and think, man, this stuff looks like crap, or looks like it would get you high. It looks so medicinal and so kind of like clinical, like a doctor should be prescribing this to you, because it comes in patches, it vapes, tinctures, these really weird form factors. And so Beam started to be born out of the idea of looking like, I think, this is a great ingredient. And I think we could really pioneer this just to be a more mainstream daily supplement, just like you might think of collagen or a vitamin or fish oil or something like that. And not have it be such a weird foreign thing. Because really, when you understand what it is and what it isn't, it really should just be consumed on a daily basis because of the benefits that it has to your body. And so Beam really was born of, let's build super high quality products. Let's build a great brand. Let's understand how to create products at the best. For what we wanted to do is build great products, the best athletes and performers in the world, trusted and used. And then our challenge would be, how do we then brand it and communicate it so that the masses are interested in using this too? And that meant think about products innovatively in terms of form factor and understanding the pain points and reasons people want to use them. So we can dive more into Beam, but that's sort
Mm-hmm.
of, I guess, the timeline. And the one thing I'll say at the end is just kind of, again, like unorthodox. That's why I think looking back, I'd say I wish maybe I just went to a startup early on and got a little bit more, but there's definitely something to be said. I guess you can kind of say, like, having a couple failed startups, and the learning that you can go through from all of those things. They're very encompassing learning experiences. But I guess I guess that was kind of long, but that's my story.
No, I liked it. Yeah, I mean, and I repeat this to myself every single day. There's no such thing as failure, only lessons to be learned,
Yeah.
right? And it sounds like you learned a lot from all of those opportunities. And it would have been cool if you went to a startup, but you wouldn't be here right now. You wouldn't be on this podcast. Your life, I mean, you essentially peaked, man. So, like, kudos and congratulations to you for getting here. But no, in all sincerity, I think it is really important, as you said. It's funny, as I told you before we got on, I started in finance as well. Absolutely hated it. That's what got me out of finance, and that's what got me into working in sports. It's the thing that I'm most passionate about. It's really the thing that I'm only passionate about is sports and just being around it and understanding from athletes and people that work in this space. And we work in this space because we love sports, but it is a crazy space to work in. I think we all can agree upon that. And you've dove in, multiple different fronts, right? You dove in from the high school prep school level where you're working one-on-one with these athletes. Then you went to, hey, let me try and sell this app to colleges. Like, that's pretty cool. This would you say the Bruins were using the application,
Yeah.
right? So, and then then you went the Olympic route, which I went the Olympic route. Shit's even crazier. People don't know about, which is pretty cool. And now you're here, helping. From a sports perspective, you're helping athletes, right? But you're helping weekend warriors too. You're helping people because you understood what this product was. It just came from that love of sports, which I think is pretty darn cool, and how you did it. And I guess I'm kind of curious, like what, going back to that, that 2018 timeframe, right? Starting this company up, what made you, I mean, I've taken CBD before, but I was never like, you know what I should really do right now? I should start up a company, So I'm kind of curious, like why, did it have that big of an impact on your life? Did you see that there was a market opportunity there? What was it that you were like, Kevin, man, we have to do this, and I think we have to do this now because this stuff is going to get pretty crazy?
Yeah, it's a good question. There's a few things into that. I think that one, Ken and I had been wanting to do something wellness related for a couple years, and because that's like one of the cores of our friendship is we just love all things health and wellness, staying active, working out, nutrition, all those things. And so you had this emerging market happening, and you can have a great idea, but if it's not the right time, it just won't work out. And we happen to be right in the thick of an emerging market going on, and there's been such an interesting timeline over the last 3 years in CBD in particular about payment processing and COVID and like what that's done to the industry. I want to say there's around like 6,000 CBD companies, which is actually a lot. It's an insane amount when you think of something like that. Like if you picked, athletic apparel or something like that, I would be shocked if there's anywhere remotely close to that number in terms of, companies in the US. Everybody, so getting a bank account, getting baking, doing payment processing, these are all insanely hard things. Just if I wanted to go start a business or we wanted to start an apparel company today, we could open up a bank account in 5 minutes, set up an online store if we had product and sell it really easily. All of that but was incredibly complicated a few years ago. And what was interesting was you had, there's pretty much like half the market now hasn't made it through this payment processing challenges, and then also COVID. But within all of that, we saw there was a really just interesting opportunity because everyone was doing the same thing. Everybody was just putting similar looking labels on these tincture bottles and just trying to jump in, essentially in a gold rush. And we really looked at it and had, I guess we just more of approached it from like, having a vision around the space, which was really, we can live it. We can really be the leading athletic, active lifestyle brand in the space. And we also knew long-term that we don't think it's like all about being just a CBD company. We always thought like we can be a wellness company. And for us from the beginning too, is like really how do we become different in the space? Every space I think is saturated and crowded, particularly in wellness for, bars and proteins and supplements and things like that. But it was really, I guess to be more direct to your question, is just like seeing there was an actual market opportunity that was very untapped. There was no clear winner. And then seeing a differentiated approach of kind of getting from like this emerging market to emerging as a leader, which we've done a really good job of. And even just, I guess, in terms of revenues in the business, like we have emerged as a leader in this category, which has been great to see. But it was, I think, just the excitement around like the challenge, like can we have these ideas that we have in our head, we think are good ideas, can we actually go execute on them? I think that's probably, I don't know that we directly said that to each other, but I think that's like what was rooted in like, let's not be all talk, like let's see if we can actually go do this. And that, we're competitive guys.
Right. You're coming from a competitive perspective. You guys have both been on teams, the leadership aspects, as we said, we were going to bring those up at some point during the conversation again. I guess, that's from the business perspective, and it all really makes sense, right? It's a lot of these companies, especially in 2018, most of the shit was getting sold out of gas stations and head shops, right? And they all looked like they all had like Jamaican flags on them. It's like, well, is it weed though? Is it not? Like, I thought it wasn't, right? Like, so it was really confusing, especially back then. I still think it is pretty confusing now, but as you said, we're starting to have many more brands come out and be different about it. And I think, as you said, you guys are doing that in a really great way because you're looking at it from that holistic wellness perspective. We think this can be a piece to the wellness puzzle for you. especially if you're an athlete, but if you're just a regular old human being like me, I go on a couple walks a day. I really like it. I enjoy it, but my knees hurt occasionally. So, hey, maybe this
Yep.
is something I can use one of these days, right? So I think it's really important to understand it from that perspective, and understanding that if you're going that sports route, you're going to get a huge crowd of people, because sports is the only on-demand, like, time appointment television you need to watch now. I'm going to watch the Mets game at 7 because the Mets are on. I'm not going to watch the Mets game tomorrow. I'm just going to watch the highlights on YouTube if I miss it, and it's going to be over in 15 minutes, and I get everything that I need, right? So that is I always think that's why the media rights and everything, blah, 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 blah. But I think that's a really great way of going about it, because you have relationships with some of these incredible athletes. So before we do dive into some of these athletes and why being athletes for athletes is really important for you guys, I guess I'm kind of curious. So that was the business perspective, but for you personally, what did CBD do? As you said, you had a really bad concussion back in, 2012 or whatever that year was. I'm sure you had a couple more injuries along the way, especially being, a top flight hockey player. What has CBD done for you, and how has it helped you personally outside of saying, hey, I want to start a business around this?
Yeah. So when we were training for that marathon in 2018, I'm not built like a long distance runner. I'd never done long distance. Kevin was one that got me into it. I've improved a lot as a runner, but that essentially that was my first long distance run. And in hockey, I just wasn't used to doing that type of training, because you really don't train endurance like that. So my knees, my Achilles, my ankles, I was getting all this tendonitis and inflammation, aches and pains. It was really bad, like the point where I couldn't even keep up with my running schedule or the training program that our coach was giving us. And that's when we started using CBD, and I realized through the consistent use of it, the aches and the pains are starting to become less and less. And one of the benefits of CBD, among many, is that it helps with inflammation, aches, and pains. We have in our body what's called, is it okay just to go into like a quick CBD 101?
Please. That was going to be
Yeah,
my next question, honestly. Like,
yeah,
what are some of the things that it does for
yeah.
like the regular human? So please.
So, and I'll just end that story and say, like, for me, like, that was the fact that I could go work out and do what I wanted to do unprohibited from, having knee issues that had been bugging me, not even just in running, candidly, like even just since hockey. That was huge for me, and that changed my life. I mean, frees me up. And um, so the high level CBD is, you have the cannabis family of plants, and you have hemp, and you have marijuana. I'll just keep it super high level and simple. All of our products come from hemp, but in both of those plants, you have a bunch of cannabinoids, which are just these different compounds inside the plant. THC is another commonly known one. That's the one that gets you high, and that's more prevalently common in marijuana. But in hemp, there's really, really low amounts of THC, high amounts of CBD, and a whole sort of portfolio of other cannabinoids. What's really interesting about CBD is that in our bodies, we have what's called an endocannabinoid system. This is maybe 20 or so years ago, I want to say. We realized we had this in our body, and essentially its main job, our ECS, is to regulate our body, to keep it in balance, to maintain homeostasis. So said differently, essentially what its job is to make sure all of the different functions going on in our body, that we're functioning the way that we should be. So when we're dealing with stress, when our body's getting ready to go to sleep, when we're dealing with digestion, inflammation, aches and pains, anxiety, stress, all these different chemical reactions, our body has a process just to keep everything in balance, and sort of like checks and balances, like through training for a marathon, or being stressed at work, not sleeping well, eating well, just being out of whack in routine. I'm sure we've all felt this at times, like your body just feels out of whack. So what's interesting is that CBD essentially is like a little, like, acts like spark plugs or repair men for your endocannabinoid system, which is then impacting a broader range of things in your body. So that's why it's confusing, because you're like, how does CBD help us sleep? But it also helps with this. And how does it help us sleep? But it's not making you tired. It's more just enabling your body to get good night's sleep in the process your body naturally goes through. So that's what's so cool about it, is it has so many interesting things. And so for me at the time, it was really about aches and pains and inflammation that it has helped mitigating. And then over time, I realized just more general benefits from it. But one thing we realized early on was people were using Beam, and we just had a tincture, an oil, an adjustable oil, and a topical. People were using our oil for very specific things like sleep, stress, anxiety, inflammation. They like during the working hours, brain fog and things like that. And so that led to our innovative product approach, which is like, okay, if people use this one ingredient for sleep, rather than building, our strategy wasn't to have a hero product and just do one thing like that. So we said, why don't we make a great sleep product? So we use the power of CBD, but then we also add in melatonin, reishi, L-theanine, and magnesium. So it really has a specific sleep function. We then created, we call them revive capsules. So we know people love it for inflammation. So we added CBD plus turmeric and a whole stack of other ingredients that are antioxidants and anti-inflammatories to help with those inflammation, tendonitis, arthritis, things like that. And then again, kind of across the board. So that's what's interesting is my story is different than someone else's story of CBD. There's a whole range of it. And that's how we also have led to sort of the product portfolio that we have, which is very, very functional, very benefit driven, just because there's a wide net that CBD can help with.
Yeah, and I think that that's, now understanding it a little bit deeper. Obviously, it can help a lot of different people do a lot of different things. As you said, you originally started taking it for one specific reason, but then you found out it can help with so many others. And now I'm assuming, please correct me if I'm wrong, if you take any of these, there's still a general benefit to it. But then, as you said, if you're looking specifically to sleep better, take sleep. But I'm sure it's going to help with any kind of aches and pains because the CBD is still there, correct?
Yeah, exactly. That's why people. That's exactly how we thought about our products, and we want to educate people too, just around CBD. It's good just to take in general because it's helping, even if you don't feel it. I think a lot of time people use supplements or especially in cannabis or in CBD, so like you're expecting to feel something immediately. It's not exactly how it works. But just general, just like you take collagen, my hair doesn't shoot out, my fingernails don't just like grow like weeds. But like over time, you start to realize maybe your skin and your hair and your joints feel healthier. Similar to CBD, just like it's more just a continued use thing, and you should just notice your body feeling better because essentially your body would be functioning more efficiently.
I love it. Well, I can't wait, man. I'm very excited. I think I already ordered some of the beams, so I don't remember which kind I got. Well, I guess we'll see. I guess we will see. So I'm very excited for it. And so, how one thing that I've noticed with the CBD product is everyone's putting CBD in everything, right? Like this has, I think for Christmas, my wife got from her mom like some like random lotion. It's like, but it has CBD in it. And like,
Yeah.
from your perspective, is that more frustrating or is that more of a, well, hey, at least more people are starting to accept it. More people are starting to say, hey, I guess this is a normal product. Like, how do you kind of fall on that? Because I could see it being really frustrating. Then it's just like, well, now we all look like a dime a dozen. But then there's the other side, as I said, of, well, at least more people are seeing the name. They're seeing the three letters. Like, hopefully that's going to help us in some way, shape, or form, right?
Yeah, it's a good perspective. You can look at it as, the adoption of it into a lot of things is helping normalize it. So it's just like a normal ingredient and not being so associated with getting you high or relaxing you. The other side to it though is like just the marketing tactic people use with it. Whether, if you're seeing a really small milligram amount, I see CBD in a lot of beverages. Is that really efficacious? Just like, I guess, would you take 2% daily value of vitamin C? Usually you see higher things, I guess, to make a comparison. So there's times when it is a little frustrating just to see it being used more as a marketing thing. But at the same time, I think that's like the opportunity as well to look at it the other way is like with all this noise going on, and I've seen it in sports bras, I've seen it in blankets, I've seen it in hamburgers. It's yeah.
How do you put it in a blanket? Like, what is that?
I'm not sure. I don't know what
I love
happens
it.
if you wash it. Yeah.
Shout out to that person who thought of it because
Yeah.
it works. That's the
Yeah.
crazy part.
Is it also is the opportunity like if we just continue to be the trusted source of it or one of a very small group of trusted sources of quality products. So it's definitely, I would say, buyer beware type of thing. I think it creates a lot of skepticism from consumers when you just start to see it in random things and understand why is it efficacious for me to put it in every single beverage. Just what we're talking about though, like it does has benefits just to be consuming CBD. But understanding like how much is an efficacious serving and what form factor is it coming in. Things that are in edibles typically aren't that efficacious from just an absorption standpoint. So definitely need to do your knowledge or your research on it before you get something.
And that's the frustrating part, right? Though, because like, where do I do my research, right? Am I getting it from a brand? I believe that you're a trusted brand. You've built this relationship with your consumers over time, but 3 years ago, nobody knew who the hell you were, right? So how would they know that you're the trusted brand to go to? So I think that part's very frustrating about it. And again, using that word trust, that is something you earn over time, right? So how did you go about, you and Kevin go about building this brand Beam to be trusted by athletes? Because again, I worked with many Olympic athletes and we talked to CBD companies, and anytime they said trace amount of anything, conversation's over, can't do anything about it, right? And
Mhm.
it's so frustrating, especially because so many of these athletes, especially again on the Olympic side, they test positive once, their career is essentially over. I mean, like obviously it's not 100%, but it's essentially over. How do you gain that trust? How do you gain that ability to go to these athletes and say, no, 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 look, this is what it's going to do. This is what it's done for me. This is what we think it'll do for you.
Yeah. I mean, just, to relate it to sports, it's like same thing. Like, the year you win a championship team or you're on a championship team, like that doesn't that doesn't happen like in that one game and you win a championship, right? It's a process of things, and it's like
Hmm.
the daily practice. It's the beginning of the season. You kind of go on that grind. I would just correlate that back to this. Like we didn't have that, like you said, 3 years ago when we are starting this out. Our approach was we started CrossFit was the first sport that we really got involved in terms of working with athletes, and those first few athletes that we brought on as partners or athletes, we really had to connect and build trust with them, really just verbally, and actually just having them use the products, but getting them like that we were athletes and we understood the importance of what goes into your bodies. Kevin and I have never been high before. That also made them feel a bit more comfortable. Like, personally, we don't even screw around with THC. We're not anti-THC, just not part of our lifestyles. We explained to them the insane testing process we go through. Um, and then finally getting a few of those athletes on board, they're getting drug tested. We're able to get some other athletes in CrossFit on board. So all of a sudden now, fast forward maybe 6 months, 12 months, we're working with the best athletes in CrossFit, who are clearly getting drug tested and are clearly insanely intense with what they put in their bodies, what they don't put in their body. That then led to being able to have conversations, with Baker, with even just friends in the NHL or in the MLB. Venus Williams participated in our last funding round. She's become a big fan of the products. That is sort of, again, like, we didn't just be able to go out and do that overnight. It really was like a painstakingly process. I wish it was a better answer of like we did this one thing. It was really just like we had to have
No,
conversations and build relationships, and us being athletes was at least able to be relatable to them. And then I guess, like, you fast forward and we just continue to have those conversations. So now we work with a bunch of amazing women who are competing in Olympics and running. Running is a new category or community that we're trying to build in. And those conversations that happened about 6 months ago were just so different because we had a whole roster of athletes that their careers on the line with drug testing and making sure what's in their body, what's not. So it's evolved, but in the early days, it was really just building relationships and having people take a little bit of a leap of faith, and a, a calculated leap of faith, but a leap of faith nonetheless.
I like that. And no, I mean, a brand isn't, built in a day. I don't think there is one
Yeah.
thing that a brand can do. I'm sure, we can go on the internet and I can be debunked very quickly, but like mostly brands are built over time, right? And again, in such a specific area that you guys are in where there's some major consequences, that would really suck if something came up.
Yeah.
I do think the fact that you and Kevin have never used regular just THC, I think that probably raised a couple eyebrows and they're like, oh, okay, well, I guess then this is fine. We'll see what happens. And again,
Mhm.
clearly it worked out. And you brought up some of the incredible athletes that you guys are working with now. I think it is so cool. How do you differentiate, I guess, between someone that wants to invest in this company, somebody that wants to be an ambassador to the company? How do you look at athletes? And it sounds very strategic because again, running is now a category that you're really trying to go after. So I'm assuming that was on purpose. But especially in the beginning, and now how you just kind of took us through the creation of the brand and the trust. What was that like, starting to bring on athletes as ambassadors, as investors, as parts of your company? Because obviously it's, to the core what you and Kevin are trying to do.
Yeah, I mean, at the highest level, as you were even just asking to, like, how do we build trust? For us, it's, we always felt like people trust things that people that they admire use. And so, in the context of CrossFit and running and some of these sports, um, we let these athletes sort of be our North Stars, like our validation that this stuff is legit, or else obviously I wouldn't be using it or screwing around with it. Um, and so in that, when it comes to the conversation around funding, one, I wish it was probably a cooler answer. Like sometimes it's just the timing. Like, are we actually raising a round of funding or not?
Hmm.
With Baker, we happened to meet Chris, one of his managers on his team, and it wasn't even about Baker. And he just shared that he was Baker's brand manager, and we started having the conversation. We said, "Oh, by the way, we're raising our seed round of funding right now. If that would be interesting." That conversation happened, and so it's happened a little, just sort of, I guess, by good, grace, good luck of timing that we're actually raising around. But We also think like if someone can come in as an investor and then as a brand partner, and sometimes that brand partner comes in, you know, either through a cash compensation or an equity compensation. It's just such a great way to build alignment with people. Like they actually have their own skin in the game. They clearly want Beam to be successful. You know, they work really hard, obviously, for the capital that they do have, and for them to put that in the business, we obviously take serious, and it just gets everybody super jazzed up to grow that relationship. So um, we, yeah, I guess that's the essence of it. Is just
Yeah.
like, yeah,
And I also think one thing that's really interesting, again, you're talking about timing of, oh, well, hey, are we having a seed round, or are we looking for investors? I also think we're in a really unique time for just athletes, because they are now realizing, more so than they have in the past, that their brands can drive significant revenue, that their time on the field isn't going to be as long as everyone thinks it's going to be, right? So outside of, back in the day, it was Michael Jordan, right? And everything was Michael Jordan. Now every single athlete, right, has a clothing brand, they have this brand, they're investing in that. You're seeing it now. Kevin Durant, LeBron James, these dudes are like billionaires doing everything they do. They make more off the court than they do on the court. They're some of the highest people paid in basketball. So I think just from a timing perspective of CBD blowing up, right? And the fact that these athletes realize, like, hey, I need to create some long-term wealth. I can't just rely on this paycheck I get once every 17, one every 17 weeks. I think is another really, really important part to it, because that's obviously led to more athletes. I mean, you see Naomi Osaka, what she does off the court is just absolutely insane. Serena Williams, you brought up, what she does off the court, what they invest in and how they do it, I think is just so cool. You can learn from just kind of what they're doing. So we talked about the different products that you guys have. What's next? You kind of, we spoke about it, very, very. Oh, and by the way, you kept saying Baker. I'm just going to say it was Baker Mayfield there. I hope that's okay. But you said his name a couple times, so I feel like we could at least just give the man his due. But from like a new product perspective, right? Beam, it's associated with CBD for a lot of people, I'm assuming, because that's your number one main source of product. But as you said, you want to be a wellness company. So what does that look like, Nesh? You don't have to obviously give away the farm, but like, what are some of the other things that are close offshoots that you can still connect? And it's not like you're going into like Theragun, you're trying to make those kind of products or anything. Like what's something close that we can kind of start getting into to really, again, start to expand this idea of a wellness company?
Yeah. So we actually recently launched a line of hydration products, and they don't contain any CBD or cannabinoids in them. And so part of that is, again, like when we think of just a broader wellness company, the different avenues that we can impact people's health and wellness. It's that question, like we're talking about, there's just CBD to everything. Of course, we could have added CBD to these hydration products, but we thought about like it really wasn't essential to do that. We've built out a bunch of products that complement people sort of in their 360 lifestyle, and we're giving them enough CBD already. We don't need to also add it to other products just to add it for the sake of adding it.
If they
So
want to, they're more than welcome to, right? Like they already have it at home, so they can just put a couple drops in, guys. It's not too bad.
Exactly. And so we've looked at it as we always want to focus on function and benefit versus just like, let's make a product and figure out how to market it. And so for us, we've tried to figure out, we talked about Matt Frazier, he's won the CrossFit Games 5 years in a row, and, super intense athlete, and maybe not overly familiar with his name if you're not in the CrossFit sport, but like, he's a big Nike athlete. I know all the Nike athletes respect him because he's the fittest man on earth. And then at the same time, there's this whole other just wellness aspect to our brand in terms of like the wellness community, like in LA, we always reference one of our friends and our partners, Nicole Kogan. Her name's Nora Bread on Instagram, and she's the opposite of Matt. She's sort of just petite female, loves going to yoga, goes to Air One, the grocery store, has her green juice and like those types of wellness things. So her and Matt are just sort of at opposite ends of the spectrum of what they do for their fitness regime, how intensely they train, what their goals are, their lifestyle, not just male, female, obviously, but also kind of like the intensity, like intense professional athlete, like, and then just living a happy, healthy lifestyle. And our goal is, how do we speak to both of those people? And for us, it was sleep, recovery, energy, and balance are common threads between those two people that we can impact their health and wellness. So whether you're an extreme athlete or you're just trying to be a better version of yourself, those are the 4 areas we think we can focus on in terms of benefits to provide that are consistent, help us impact a lot of people, not just athletes, not just wellness enthusiasts, and also are meaningful. And so it keeps us super focused in our product strategy so that we don't get too crazy when we're talking about like putting CBD and all these things, or branching out and creating massage guns and getting into that space, or, you know, wanting to become an apparel company. You know, we stay pretty disciplined. And then really, if it's just like, we want to think about too, like, what are the real pain points that people experience? And there's a whole bunch of other stuff we want to get into in the coming years. But it's how do we create and serve real pain points and benefits people are actually looking for, and then what's a stack of ingredients that really help do that. And then, you know, if it's can we make it taste great? What's the form factor it comes in? Is it convenient? Meet these people where they are. You know, again, like early days in CBD, you saw patches. You know, I think most people typically would just assume a patch, like a nicotine patch. It was very odd to think about consuming something like that. So there's a lot of stuff we consider with that. The main thing, though, is it always revolves around pain points, benefits, functions, and what is it that people actually need. I think one of the mistakes sometimes people have in wellness, in particular, consumer packaged goods, is just they have a product that they like and they think is a good idea, but they don't understand how, like, if other people like this, or how do I actually communicate it and make it relatable so the masses end up liking it too. They get very in love with their own ideas. So I think we've taken a good approach of understanding, like, how do we communicate to people, like, what do they actually need, even if they don't say that directly to us. A little bit, I guess, into our product strategy.
Yeah, yeah, and I think it's really important, right? Again, you're kind of looking at it from, again, we talked about it, that holistic point of view where, yeah, it started with CBD, but what is it? 72% of people are dehydrated, right? Like, it's just like such an insane number to me where, like, I'm never dehydrated. I can promise anybody that. I mean, I'm sure I have been recently, but like, I drink, first thing I do, slam a glass of water when I wake up at 6:50 or whatever in the morning. That's literally the best thing you could do to start your day, is just drink a glass of water. Because think about it. You probably haven't drank in, like, I don't know, like a solid 10, 12 hours, depending on when your last glass of water was. You're dehydrated. So drink a glass of water. You feel a million times better in the morning. So I make sure to do that every single morning. But no, man, I think it's really great. I think what you guys are doing is really cool. I think the product is very important. And again, from the perspective where it came from the business side, I think is really interesting. And that's why I love to have these conversations, because it also comes from that athlete side of you, and, you know, how to help people in those perspectives. So Matt, this has been absolutely fantastic. Matt Lombardi, co-founder of Beam. Not going to say former, professional hockey player with the Devils and the Penguins. No such thing as a former athlete. You're still an athlete now. Matt, where can everyone follow you? Where can everyone follow Beam? Give me all the links. Give me all everywhere we can go, and then I'll put them in the show notes for everybody that's listening on the podcast.
Cool. Yeah, my personal Instagram is just Matt Lombardi, the number 24. Beam is just at Beam, BEAM, and then our website is beamtlc.com. When we first launched, we had one of our taglines was no THC, just TLC. So that's where the TLC comes from. Yeah.
We'll tend to appreciate you so much, man.
Thank you.
All right. Bye, everybody.